Jimmy Carter and his wife decided they were going to crack down on cults and to determine if it was a cult and to determine if it was dangerous and if it could lead to something like the Jonestown Massacre. One of the reasons they decided it wasn't a cult was that it wasn't organized well enough.
All right, guys, without further ado, here is Mr. Matt Dixon, who was my TM instructor. Matt, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Matt Dixon. I'm a teacher of Transcendental Meditation. I'm also an advanced technique teacher of Transcendental Meditation. So once you've been doing TM for some time, there are advanced techniques that you can take. And I teach those as well as the basic TM technique.
All right. Now, what got you started? What made you want to take that plunge?
You know, my mother became a TM teacher before I was born. So long ago, my mom got into TM, just saw a poster, heard about it, went and heard somebody give an introductory talk. This was back in the 70s. And she was inspired. It was something that she was just, intuitively looking for. A lot of people were learning TM in those days, but she was intuitively looking for it. And she heard the lecture and learned TM and fell in love with it, started doing it every day and never looked back. And then she became a TM teacher when I was about 5. And truth be told, it was something that my mom did. My dad learned, wasn't that into it. My stepfather got really into. I didn't really consider my own practice of TM. I learned there's a technique for children, which you can learn at 5. There's the technique that you and I practice, which you can learn as early as 10. So I learned at 5, I learned at 10, but I never really considered it myself as a practice. I was a kid. It's what your parents do. Never really considered it myself as a practice until I was 18 years old. And, I was starting to deal with, the reality of life, and I'm getting out of high school, and can I go to college, and, all these things. And so I started doing TM on my own. I just, I knew how to do it. I had, I learned my mantra, and so I just started doing TM, and I got into it. It was nice. It was gradual. It took a few years to sort of, get through the college experience and all of that, but I did TM and it seemed to help. But when I was in my early 20s, 21, 22, I got really serious about the practice. I had been studying political science. I changed my major. I started studying Vedic science, which is basically just Indian Eastern philosophy. And then I kind of never looked back after that. I started working for TM part-time as much as I could. I wasn't yet a teacher, but I wanted to become a teacher. I got my advanced techniques. I did the TM Siddhi program, which is like a kind of a grand 5th advanced technique that you can get. And I just was really, really I got really into my TM practice, almost to the degree that it was almost like for a few years, I was sort of living like a monk's life, like basically doing nothing but just meditation and study of Vedic knowledge, studying the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, diving into any type of esoteric spiritual material that I could find from all traditions, really. And, very, very serious about my practice of TM, doing yoga every day, pranayama, deep breathing every day. I mean, really into it. And then when I was 26, I became a TM teacher and started teaching TM. And I've pretty much been doing that with some little gaps here and there for 25 years now, 27 years. And I've been an advanced technique teacher for about 10 years. Before I was teaching advanced techniques, I was very focused on teaching at-risk populations. I did that very intensely for about a decade. I worked in a Native American reservation, inner city schools, prisons. I worked with the VA. I was worked on a few studies that got published, studies showing that transcendental meditation was very beneficial for treating post-traumatic stress. So yeah, that was a big focus. And in the last maybe 4 to 6 years, teaching advanced techniques has really become the focus. And I have a daughter who's 2.5 now. And so for the last 2.5 years, she's very much been the focus. So I don't work
As she should be.
as she should
As
be.
she should be.
I
That's a
don't.
good dad thing.
That's right. That's right. I don't work quite as much as I did, but I probably will again at some point. But I'm teaching advanced techniques and raising my daughter and with my wife, and yeah, that's what the focus is.
Well, that's amazing. You're like the original Nepo baby, though. Nepo babies are so popular right now. Your mom was a teacher, you fell in. Look at you, so classy and hip.
I I suppose so. I suppose so. A lot of my friends who we grew up TM kids. Our parents got into TM in the '60s or '70s when it was, because there was a time where Transcendental Meditation wasn't. I mean, it's popular, but there was a time where it was really, really popular in the United States. In '64, the Beatles learned Transcendental Meditation, and it just exploded. And millions of people. I mean, there were TM centers around the United States, and there were lines, around the block. People come to learn TM, and then there were some big waves. Maharishi was on Merv Griffin's show. Maharishi was on Dick Cavett's show. That was in the '70s, and there were massive, massive waves. Millions of people really learning Transcendental Meditation, and a lot of us TM kids came out of that era in the sense that our parents were really into TM. But most of my friends, we're all 50 years old basically now. Most of my friends are not into TM, and it's interesting because they have, some of them have stressful lives and things, and all they would need to do is sit down and close their eyes, and they could start to meditate right now because they know how. They learned when they were kids, but they don't because they have some sort of resentment. They feel like, I don't know, they grew up with it. It was what their parents did. It was weird. Maybe somebody tried to push them to meditate. I was lucky. My parents never tried to push me to meditate. I just, even though I was, sort of born into it, as it were, I did find it on my own. They never pushed me to do it. And really I came to it on my own, and that made all the difference.
Well, that makes sense too, because we came home from our practice and we were telling our 15-year-old, and we're like, this is what you need to do. And as soon as and he just, the eyes glazed over, and I was just like, oh no. I was like, I'm that mom right now. I talk about my husband's mom pushing him into Christianity, and I'm the one right now being like, now this is right. This is what you should be doing. This will fix your life. And I was like, oh no. Okay. So I kind of backed off and was like, all right, I need to let him come to it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And, I always tell parents, because they ask me, should my kid learn? And, what should I do about it? They could really benefit from it, all that stuff. And I always tell parents, I said, look, if they're interested, you can invite them to learn. And if they're interested, then sure, allow them to learn, pay for them to learn, or whatever it is. Take them to the TM teacher, let them do the TM course. You may want to, sit in with them if they want you to. If they don't, let them run with it on their own. But once they learn, basically don't say another word, because they got it. They're intelligent. They know how to do it. They'll do it when they need to. And if you do the practice twice a day, and they see that you're benefiting from it, when the time comes, when the stress is on, or when the natural impulse comes within them, they'll do the practice. And basically at that point, all you can do as a parent is get in the way if you try to push them to do it.
And that makes sense. So fingers crossed he does it, because, okay, here's the thing. I haven't missed one since I started, October 2022. And like you say, there are people that know that quit. I do not understand this. To me, it's like a magic elixir. You know what I mean? Why would I not do this twice a day?
Yeah.
I don't want to go back to what life was before I did this. We all remember those days. It wasn't as good. I have a whole list of how it improved my life. Why would I not want to do this? I
agree. But you know what? Everybody's got their own path. And, for some people, they learn and then they do it for a while. And I work with people all the time. They come to take advanced techniques, and maybe they learned in the 70s and they did it for a while, and then they got caught up in a family and career and didn't do it for a decade or two, and then they pick up the practice again. And so it happens. There's various reasons for it. Did your son learn TM?
No, 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 no. We were just kind of broaching the topic with him. Like when you're,
Yeah.
we more
Yeah.
said like when you're old enough, this is something we would like you to explore.
Yeah. Yeah. That's about all you need to do. And just keep doing it yourselves, because doing it yourselves, whether you say anything or not, if you do it yourselves and you're benefiting, your child will know. They will notice. And they'll, at some point they'll come to you and they'll say, hey, maybe I could take that or something. Yeah, it'll happen.
What was kind of the biggest difference you saw in your life? Like what would be the biggest, like this was a sign that this changed everything?
When I was in college, just, trying to kind of live the usual college life, partying and, drinking. And I mean, I wasn't like some heavy drug user, but, whatever college kids do. I was sort of, I guess seeking, happiness along kind of those routes, like, I don't know, you're doing school, but you're also like, going to parties and doing all this stuff. And I think it was actually because I was also doing TM, and, Transcendental Meditation works really well if you take care of your body. So if you're getting enough rest and eating well and doing some exercise and meditating regularly, it works really well. It doesn't work as well if you're going out, and staying up at all hours and drinking and, that kind of stuff that can dull out the, nervous system and all these things. But I started meditating very regularly when I was 18, and I did that through college, despite sort of being, a little bit of a party animal at times. And what happened was that it really, the TM, even though, I'm sure there were some dull, sleepy meditations in there. It really brought me out the other side, in the sense that, I came to a point where I was like, this doesn't really make me feel good. There's no future in this. This isn't sustainable. So it was very easy for me to just go like, I feel so good when I just, eat right, exercise, do my meditation. I don't really have any need to have like in this party scene or, like I'd much rather just get a good night's sleep and have a great life. And that was easy to step into. And I feel like my friends who didn't have TM or who didn't do TM, it was like going out and partying was their means to release stress, but it wasn't sustainable. And then there's this backlash from it because it's not good for the body. And for me, I don't know, to be able to step in and have a technique, to have TM and have it be able to create, I don't know, to good feelings, to be able to feel good without something, I don't know, like a drawback, something that had side effects, was just, that was a huge selling point. And then what happened, that was the initial selling point. And then what happened was I started to aspire to enjoy higher states of consciousness. Somebody who comes and learns for PTSD, or, somebody's doctor says, hey, your blood pressure is really high. And the guy goes like, I don't want to take that blood pressure medication anymore because it doesn't make me feel good. All right, well, maybe you should do Transcendental Meditation because, TM has all this research, and a lot of the research on Transcendental Meditation is about heart health. And at one point, the American Heart Association said that TM was the best meditation for your heart and all these things. So some doctor maybe says to you, go learn TM. So somebody will come for some reason like that and then start practicing TM. And at some point go, wait a second. This is starting to address some really deep fundamental needs that we have as human beings. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the top of that pyramid is self-realization, basically. Knowing oneself and getting to that point. And, Maslow sort of says that you have to go through these stages, like, you have plenty of security and like, you go through these stages of life that everything's like, okay. And then you can sort of be self-actualized. But with TM, it's like just doing the practice, in addition to relieving stress and all these things, it gives you the direct experience of self-actualization. You experience a little tidbit of self-actualization every time you practice. And as you get rid of more stress, you become more and more self-actualized. So now you're starting to grow to higher states of consciousness. And what does that start to provide? It starts to provide, answers where there were questions before. It starts to provide solutions where there were problems before. It starts to give you a really broad perspective of life and sort of fill in some of the gaps that, we face, because it's, everybody goes through this, younger or older, where you look at life and you go, okay, so I see, I'm getting older and my parents are getting older and I'm doing this job and this is cool and everything. But where's all this sort of going to? What's the big picture? We're sort of floating around on this rock, going around this star, in this universe. Like, where do I fit in as a human being? And as a human being, as part of, this race of human beings. And so you start to transcend and you start to find access to knowledge within yourself, but also the illumination of the inner experience, which leads to far greater knowledge outside as well. So that really, the cultivation of higher states of consciousness, of self-realization, to me, that's the real reason for the practice of transcendental meditation. And even though that's not why oftentimes people get into it, the secondary reason is that, it releases stress and sleep improves and, life gets easier and wow, I feel healthier and more energy and all that. But really, self-realization, if we have the opportunity to know our true selves, to realize our full potential as individuals, which is what is our full potential? The ability to know anything, to do anything, to achieve anything through the power of our minds, through merely desiring, to be able to, have any understanding or any experience, really, no kidding, no joke, just through the power of the mind and through the power of consciousness. And when you start to taste that and see that start to manifest in life, that to me, that becomes the real charm and the real reason that one continues to, be committed to one's meditation practice day in and day out.
You gave me chills when you said all that because, okay, full disclosure, when I went in for my practice and I'm talking to David and I'm looking around at the walls and there's all these grand promises, I was like, yeah, right. Anything too good to be true in life is too good. This was the one thing in my life that everything happened. Every word you just said is 100% true. I'm living it. I feel it. I know exactly what you were saying. And that to me is priceless in this world, because how much stuff is taught to us just to have faith in? You know what I mean? Where I can live your words instead of just told, well, someday you'll feel this. Someday you'll know.
Yeah, that's it. And really, you look at so many religions in the world. They have these, these promises. You have some what do you want to call it? The religion is started from some person, some being, some person, the Son of God or whatever it is and then there's these, do this and behave like this and behave like this and behave like this. And, trying to do those things is a continuous source of failure for most people, to try to behave in a particular way. And then, love your neighbor, for example. But, God, but my neighbor just bought a Ferrari and I'm still driving this beater. But hey, that's not fair and whatever, it's like these, you're trying to adhere to what religion is telling you to do, but you're not having that experience. You're not feeling it. You're not living it. So when you start to actually feel better and you start to feel yourself starting to expand inside, when there's a fullness inside, when there's a satisfaction and a happiness and a contentment and actually love inside, then the idea of, love my neighbor or any tenet of religion, but, love my neighbor, for example, starts to become a living reality when you start to actually feel love inside. If you're walking around miserable all the time and just, I love my neighbor, but you're gritting your teeth, it's like, well, it doesn't go very far. And the moment you get pushed over that edge, well, now you're back to hating your neighbor. You know what I mean? So I firmly believe that every religion was started on the basis of human beings being taught to transcend, or wherever they got that knowledge from, but transcending and expansion of consciousness, because every single one of us is, and this is my opinion, and I really think this is the case, that every single one of us as human beings has a nervous system that is capable of infinite achievement. Absolutely infinite. And we all play our own role, but everybody has the capacity, just by virtue of having the nervous system, to be totally happy, to be totally fulfilled, no matter whether you sweep floors or you build companies. It doesn't matter. Total fulfillment is available to every human being because you have the physiology. As it says in the Bible, man is created in the image of God, or whatever it is. The physiology is designed like a radio receiver. And I often think, if you, for example, if you took your laptop or your cell phone, but you take your laptop nowadays, by comparison to the computers that they made in the 50s, that took up a whole room or a whole warehouse, a modern laptop has such incredible computing power. If you knew what to do with it, there's incredible computing power in that individual laptop. So even that is great, kind of like individual human beings can have really great intelligence. There are some really, really smart, really, really creative people in this world. But just like with that laptop, if you plug that laptop, now it might have, tremendous power on its own, but you plug it into the internet, and suddenly when you're online, suddenly you have basically infinite knowledge, infinite information, infinite computing capacity. Things start to become very close to, if not infinite, when you get online, when you're connected to the mainframe, to the network, to the internet, whatever it is, you're connected. And I believe the human physiology is like that as well. So some of us are more, intellectually developed. Some of us are more spiritually developed. There's some people who are, really creative. Some people who, great artists and, great mathematicians and all this. And, you might look at somebody who's really, really good at, higher order math, and there's some professor at MIT or something, and think, oh my God, I barely passed, algebra 2 or something. Fine. But even that professor who is so brilliant, they still struggle in different areas of life. They still don't get along with their spouse, and they got health problems, and they're frustrated here and there. They can go and they can do incredible mathematics, but they still have issues in other areas of life. When you plug into the mainframe, when you tap your human physiology into that pool, that reservoir of infinite intelligence, from where all thought comes from, where all matter comes from where we all come from, when you transcend thought and the mind is able to directly experience that pool of infinite energy at the basis of everything, including the basis of the mind, when you experience that, it's like plugging into the great internet in the sky or whatever. You're plugging into the mainframe, and at that point, you have access to infinite knowledge, infinite information, infinite energy, and there's no comparison between somebody who's self-realized, as we say, and established in that field where their mind is permanently stabilized and connected to that source of infinite energy. There's no comparison to the intelligence and to the mental power and fortitude that somebody who's established in that field has, by comparison to even the most intelligent, IQ intelligent people in the world. There's just no comparison. When you plug into the mainframe, it's next level. And so, your local, floor sweeper, at the grocery store, or the janitor or whatever, if they're doing meditation, they can drop in there. And if they get rid of those stresses that are preventing them from, really connecting, if they get rid of those stresses, boom, you open that up, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they learned before. It doesn't matter if they ever graduated from high school or passed algebra. It doesn't matter. Suddenly, their ability to compute and understand is way beyond the capacity of anybody who's not connected to the mainframe, as it were. So to me, that's the real appeal. That's it. Go for the gold, And when more and more human beings are even moving in that direction, problems start to be solved in society. They can just evaporate these things that we, wars and these things that we all battle against, and greed and all this stuff. It can just evaporate when human beings in a collective level start to really feel fulfilled on the inside.
I was watching something, they talked about how it can change the vibrations even of the environment with all that. And we have the power with our minds to do that, to stop these things from happening with these greater. And I've never heard religion described better than you. Like, that was so perfect, where it is love your neighbor, but you hate your life. Because also everything whenever I saw religion, it was always based on outside. You know what I mean? There was never turning inside. And now that I do TM, I know that's why so many people are unhappy in religion, is because you're literally being taught the wrong direction. You're being spun around and going the wrong way. And you might be going really far, but you're going in the wrong direction and you don't even know it.
Yeah. And you don't know how to get there. You don't have a tool to get there. You have this, some of the points are wonderful. Every religion I can think of, they say good things about, be good to others, and, be happy and be virtuous and, be a good person, essentially. It's all great. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's how to do it when I'm feeling, frustrated and let down and burnt out and exhausted and unhealthy and angry and all these things, how to be all those things. And so one could say, oh, well, I struggle and I just grit my teeth and I say nice things, even if I don't feel that and all this. Oh, but it's a terrible struggle. Why not have a tool to develop that quality within, where you actually feel those things, and then behaving in that manner becomes a piece of cake. It's just automatic, spontaneous.
Well, because you're, like you said so well, you're content with yourself. I know I felt like this made me a better person. It made me understand and see both sides. And it's an invaluable tool, because I was really upset on election night. I hadn't been tempted to take a pill since I stopped. And that was the first time. And I was like, this isn't good. And I went and meditated and I felt so much better. You know what I mean? And I was like, you don't need that. And it let me see through. And it is like this hidden power that you have, that when things are bad, you're stressed out, you can go and do this and things are better after. They always are.
That's right. And, you mentioned election night. The truth of it is that we get caught up in these things and we think, oh, it's going to matter who the president is, or it's going to matter who, is. And it does on a surface level. Yeah, it matters. But we have to remember that who is in those position, who holds those positions, is the byproduct of the overall quality of all of us put together, the collective consciousness. So all of us put together. And if we want our leaders to be more virtuous, if we want our leaders to be better, if we want them to behave better, if we want them to be, less greedy and whatever it is, and less warlike or whatever, if we want that, then we need to be less that ourselves. That means that you and me, but everybody all together, the summation, the average of us all needs to be, happier, more fulfilled, more compassionate, more understanding. If we're all running around feeling like, aggressive, animals, violent and, willing to, undercut our neighbor for, one penny and all these things. If we're all behaving like that, you can't expect your leaders to be any different. They're just the reflection of all of us. And so ultimately, what matters is who we are on an individual level, and everybody has tremendous power at that level. We're all trees in a forest. And the old example we used as TM teachers was, if you want a green forest, then you need green trees. And so every single one of us is a tree in the forest. And if we water the root and take care of ourselves and make our leaves green, which we actually have control of, then you start to get a green forest. If you, are not taking care of yourself and, you're bitter and all these things, that's going to affect your neighbor directly, but also on that vibrational level where we're all really connected. And you can't have a good leader if all the followers are, or all the people in the nation or whatever are negative. It's not going to happen.
And that, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's it exactly, because that's what I took away from it is, wow, this meant, you know what I mean? It was kind of like, this is what we decided collectively. So, okay. I also really think COVID messed people up. And if they would have been meditating instead of whatever they're doing now, it's very dog eat dog, every man for themselves. And it didn't used to be like that, Not so much, it didn't feel like.
Or maybe it was, but we didn't see it. I feel like one thing that COVID did was it kind of settled everything down, and sort of, I mean, we don't want a societal emergency. Obviously we don't want these things, and it was disrupting and very destructive to the, economy and to, people's lives and all these things. Okay, fine. But there were a couple moments there. I remember, there were a couple very peaceful moments. I was living here in San Diego with my wife, and there were some very, very peaceful moments where, the world kind of stopped for a minute, and it felt like everything was sort of, in a state of rest. And that's a step in the right direction. It's just that what we need to do is we need to not be in a state of rest because we're under some, government control, but we need to be in a state of rest because everybody has chosen to take rest twice a day, and the metabolic rate settles down, and the physiology settles down, and suddenly everybody starts to sleep better. And suddenly, here's an interesting fact. That every year when we go off of daylight savings time, now you're in Arizona, so you guys have been standardized, but
yes,
whenever we go off of daylight savings time, so you go from, when you go from standard time to daylight time. So in the spring, you spring forward an hour. So that means everybody loses an hour of sleep. It's well-known fact. Insurance companies know this. It's a well-known fact that Monday, so we change on Saturday night, you spring forward, everybody loses an hour of sleep. That Monday morning, there's an increase in traffic fatalities. There's an increase in hospital admissions, heart attacks, automobile accidents. 1 hour less rest. And there's all these negative trends in society. And in the fall, when we fall back, when we gain that hour of rest back, there's the reverse. On Monday morning, there's the reverse. There's less traffic fatalities. There's less traffic accidents, less hospital admissions. Negative tendencies are reduced. And we found the same thing happens in a collective, in an environment where there's a number of people practicing TM. We used to say it was about 1% of the population doing TM daily, that you start to see a reversal in negative trends in society, that you start to see less hospital admissions and the crime rate starts to drop and things start to get better. Basically, we as human beings, we're exhausted. We're exhausted. Our brains are taxed. I was just reading today about the value of sleep and how if you don't get sufficient sleep, then your brain actually accumulates toxins and it doesn't have a chance to get rid of those toxins. And so now you have these toxins in the brain that impair the functioning of the brain and heat up the brain and literally impair the functioning of the brain and impair clear thinking. We're exhausted as human beings. Why are we exhausted as human beings? Because we're chasing fulfillment outward. We're chasing fulfillment outward, and you can't find it going outward. You have to feel good on the inside. Now, life can be fulfilling, but it's fulfilling on the basis of having fulfillment and being okay on the inside. And, a great example of that is if you've ever met somebody who was independently wealthy, maybe some kid who's a trust fund kid, and they have everything that money can buy. Sometimes they're even famous. Sometimes they're even famous as well. So say somebody's, they're rich, they're famous, they're good looking, they're everything that society tells you that you need to have in order to be happy. And yet they're miserable. And sometimes they even commit suicide. How can somebody get to the point where they destroy their own body? They destroy their own life. They literally kill themselves because they're so miserable inside. And yet on the outside, they have everything that society says that if you chase after those things and you get those things, you're going to be happy. The nice house, the nice car, the wealth, the friends, the fame, all these things, and yet they're miserable. And so I argue that it doesn't, all that stuff is secondary. That you can, if you have happiness inside, you can be, you can sweep floors. You can sweep floors and you can have very, very little. In fact, there have been studies that have shown that as your income increases, if you're below the poverty level where you don't have a safe place to sleep or you don't have enough food, those things, as you start to get more resources, more money or whatever, and you start to be able to have a safe place to live and more food, the very fundamental needs as human beings, that actually makes a huge leap in one's level of happiness. When you don't have those things, you're pretty miserable. And when you start to have those things, you're happy. But once you've achieved that base level where you have like a secure place to live, you have some income, that you're going to be able to eat. Once you get to that kind of basic level, and then you start to increase in income, at that point you start to plateau, actually. And there's a much smaller increase in happiness for every increase in income, as it were. Because really, money doesn't buy you happiness. It's nice. We all want it. And sure, let's take as much as we can. But really what brings happiness is happiness within. And how do we get that? Well, we're all born with it. It's all, God-given, as it were. But if you have stress in the physiology is impure and there's stress there, you can't experience it. And you got to get that stress out. And there are and you got to transcend. You have to transcend. The mind has to transcend. If the mind gets stuck in a limited object referral, perception, and all you're seeing is that, there's my job and I have to drive on this freeway. And, even if you're seeing that you have a Ferrari in your driveway, at some point, the Ferrari is no longer appealing. It's no longer charming. It would brought you happiness in the beginning, but today you don't care. You don't care. You just want to feel good on the inside. So you can have the objects, that's fine, but you got to have the subjective experience. You have to feel good inside. The mind has to enjoy freedom. If it doesn't enjoy freedom, every human being is miserable. And that's what drives our world, is this chase for happiness on the outside. And it leads people to do all kinds of really awful stuff, which they then have to pay the price for eventually. And it doesn't bring happiness. You have to have it on the inside.
You're so right. If people would just listen to you, you know what I mean? But I'm sure there are some cynical people to be like, yeah, right. That's, and it's kind of like, no, it really is that simple. And it is the truth.
Yeah.
Like I told you, when I was learning, I had a prescription pill problem. I stopped, picked up TM months later, but seeing how that helped me kind of heal that broken part of myself. I had gone through the physical part, but TM really helped heal me mentally. And once you feel happiness, once you feel that gift of knowing yourself and loving yourself, you want other people to have that too. I feel like, you're so happy with yourself. I'm like, I want you to be the best version of yourself. This would help you.
That's right. I mean, really, interestingly enough, you say it like that, there's no room for jealousy when you're fulfilled inside. You're just fulfilled. What's there to be jealous about? You're happy. You want everybody else to be happy because, shoot, you're happy. That's it. And that's what everybody wants. I worked on a study with the Oregon Department of Corrections. So I used to teach Transcendental Meditation in the Oregon State Prison. It's a maximum security prison with death row. It's the real thing. You go into this prison, it's what you see in the movies. It's got 35-foot high walls and, guard towers. And, if you try to climb the walls, they'll shoot you and kill you. I mean, it's real. It's the real deal. And people who live in prison, aside from what Hollywood tries to show us that, prison, being in prison, some sort of gladiator school or whatever, maybe a little bit in the beginning, maybe a lot in the beginning, but at some point, everybody who's in prison reaches a point where they're experiencing abject desperation and hopelessness, just because they've been cast out. They're in this sort of alternate society, and what can you do with your life? Why are you even alive? Just to live in there and to live in these walls, and they tell you when the lights go out and the lights go on, and nobody has anything, and you just live in this confined space, and whatever. So it's a hopeless environment. It's a desperate environment. And when we did the study, when we taught people Transcendental Meditation and we had the control group, it was so fascinating because the study was published in Kaiser Permanente's journal in 2016, and you can find it. And it showed, a decrease in symptoms of post-traumatic stress as indicated by dissociation, sleep problems, anxiety, depression. It showed that there was a decrease in all those symptoms of PTSD in inmates who practice Transcendental Meditation as compared to the control group. Okay, so it was a significant study, but anecdotally, the things that I learned when I was in that prison, when I was going in there every single day and watching those gates close behind you, and you're in these sally ports, and you're in there with general population, you're walking around with the inmates, and you cannot leave. The doors are shut, and you can't leave until they open them and let you leave. And you live it, and you're experiencing it. You're in there, and fortunately, you can go home at night, but you're in there, and you see what it's like. And, I got to know the counselors, I got to know the inmates, and the things they would tell me, the shift, the only thing that they had changed, everything was the same food, same people, same space, everything was the same. And what changed was that they learned their mantra, and they learned to close their eyes and think their mantra effortlessly and take it as it comes. And the consciousness expansion, the mind expansion, the freedom that they experienced on the inside changed everything. And I had counselors come up to me, and we'd be sitting in and doing group meditation, and I'd have 30 inmates in a room. We'd be sitting and doing group meditation. Now, every room in a prison has windows. And so we'd be in there, and the counselors would walk by, and they'd come up to me after, and they'd say, "Matt, did you know that in your group there, sitting there with eyes closed, there were members of opposing gangs? And out on the yard, they're going to slit each other's throats. And in there, they're meditating, they're closing their eyes. They feel comfortable enough. These men would not have gone to sleep in the same room, but they would close their eyes and practice Transcendental Meditation, because you're cultivating alertness, you're cultivating wakefulness, and you're cultivating peace within." And there were men that would the counselors would tell me, they say, "This guy hasn't spoken to his sister in 5 years, and now he's willing to meet with her. He's willing to talk to her on the phone. This guy, his relationship with his spouse is improving, with his kids is improving, with the other inmates is improving. There's not infractions like there once were." And all that changed, because a prison's a highly controlled environment, the only thing that changed was that the inner experience of that human being changed. And that was it. And it changed everything, because that inner experience, that's the hub. And every other facet of life is just a spoke coming out from that hub. And if you try to fix things, you try to fix this area of your life and solve this problem, you can be running around like a chicken with your head cut off. You start to fix things on the inside, and all that stuff starts to improve automatically.
That's so inspiring, because I met a prisoner. We were out to happy hour, and they thought my husband looked like somebody who was on a Bravo reality show. And then they showed me the picture. This boy was like 23. You met Drew. He is gray as a day is long. I said, "No, he looks like that guy's grandpa." Yeah. So then they liked us, but he was telling me that he had been in prison for 17 years, and now his passion was to make healthy food for them and stuff. And I just thought that was so amazing. You know what I mean? That he turned that experience that he had into wanting to better it for other people, and how TM could help, and how if we were actually rehabilitating people, that's fine. They're stuck physically in jail. That sucks. That's a consequence of your actions. But if you could be like, but hey, in your mind, it's endless. How much prison violence would go down? How, you know what I mean? How many people would actually be parolable where they weren't before? And isn't that the whole point? To rehabilitate?
That should be the point. Unfortunately, there's a huge prison industry, as there is within everything. but there's a prison industry, and there are private prisons, but even state-run prisons, federal prisons. I mean, there's an industry that surrounds these things, and there's people who lobby for stiffer penalties and to not let people out. But that's neither here nor there. What I experienced was that by and large, particularly at a certain point, sometimes with the younger guys in prison, under 30, I did a little study on my own once, and I found that the inmates that I'd worked with, that when they were under 30, they were less apt to be serious about their TM practice. It was more like maybe, 1 in 3 would get serious about their TM practice. But once they hit 30 years of age and up, it was like 90% were serious about their TM practice, because they got past that point where they kind of established themselves in the prison, and they got past the kind of the gang stuff and all that. And they got to a point where they're like, okay, what the heck? Here I am in prison. What am I going to do? How can I make my life better? How can I, get out of here and not come back, and all those things. And there are good things that happen in prisons. I worked with a lot of people who were, in 12-step programs. And if you take those programs seriously, most of the men that I taught Transcendental Meditation to, most of the men that I worked with in prisons were religious. So they were primarily Christian or Muslim, and they were very, very serious about their religion. And when they would learn Transcendental Meditation, it would improve their religion dramatically. And I had men come up to me and say, "Oh, I've read the Bible 9 times back to back. And now I learned Transcendental Meditation, and I'm starting to understand things that the Bible says that I never could grasp before. I'm starting to feel these things and be able to live these principles laid out in these religious tenets." And you can't make that happen from the outside. You can't. That person has to change and realize those things. And look, I saw people work 12-step programs, and through prayer and stuff, they were able to make changes. There's no doubt about it. But TM is such an incredible facilitator. When you put that into the mix, in fact, the person who started Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill Wilson learned Transcendental Meditation in 1968. My friend Lincoln Norton taught Bill Wilson Transcendental Meditation in 1968. And when Bill learned, he was old. I mean, I think Bill passed away maybe 3-4 years after that. But when he learned TM, the first thing he said after his very first practice of Transcendental Meditation, his first meditation session, he looked at my friend Lincoln and he said, "That's what I meant when I wrote the 11th step." He said, "That's it. That contact with higher power, that meditation through meditation or prayer." He said, "That's the essence of it, is exactly what you get through TM." So you got to have that element if you really want to make progress.
Hopefully I'll make enough money to do something like that. I really want to roll out rehabilitation, whether it through drugs, prison, anything like that. I just really feel like.
Yeah.
And also, okay, here's a question. It was so popular in the 60s and 70s. Why is it not popular now, when I think that we could use it more than ever?
I think that trends, when something is a fad, it's a good thing. A lot of people learn TM, but it never lasts. You get a Beatles wave or whatever, and a bunch of people learn. But why are they learning? They're learning for superficial reasons, a lot of them, and still it's beneficial to them, but they're learning because, John Lennon learned or whatever. And it's like, eventually you got to find it within yourself that, you're doing this practice. And actually, truth be told, I think a lot of people who learn TM, it doesn't really matter why they learn. They learn because, John Lennon does it, or, Oprah does it, or Hugh Jackman, or Katy Perry, or whoever it is, your favorite celebrity, because Howard Stern said that you should learn TM or whatever. I mean, I taught a lot of people TM because Howard Stern said Transcendental Meditation changed his life and his mother's life. And then you get through the door, and then somebody learns TM. And so, yeah, so people learn for different reasons. I think that there are a lot of people who practice Transcendental Meditation seriously, and just, you don't know it. They don't talk about it, but they learned, and they're just benefiting from it every day. The other thing is that maybe it's not for everybody, not right now. Ultimately it works for everybody's physiology, but I've met people who they just weren't ready for it. They just weren't ready for a meditation practice. They weren't interested. It just wasn't where they were, and we all have to come to a time in our life where we think this is right for you. And that's kind of like with what we started out talking about with kids, like everybody's got to find it for themselves, ultimately. And it can be there and it can be available. Look, it's not hard to find transcendental meditation. In my opinion, all you'd have to do is just get online, just type in transcendental meditation. That's it, or even, learn meditation. TM's probably going to come up, it's going to be right at the top of that. There'll be some other types of meditation, but so I don't think it's hard to find it. I just think that one has to be ready for it. I have friends who I'm really into surfing, and I have a bunch of friends that I surf with, and we know each other from surfing. We've been surfing at the same spots for 10 years, 12 years, or whatever. And I know these people. Like, I talk to them sometimes 3-4 hours a week. Like, I see them, we talk, and we enjoy surfing together. And they know that I teach meditation. They know that I teach transcendental meditation. Only a couple of them have learned TM. Only a couple. And I've talked to many, many friends, and they know me. They know me. They see me. They know the kind of person I am. They trust me for whatever it's worth. I mean, shoot, they know that if they, got held down by a wave and they weren't coming up, that I'd be paddling over there to try to help them. They know that we're looking out for each other. We're doing a dangerous activity together, and we're looking out for each other. And yet, that doesn't make them necessarily want to take the step to learn TM. They know that all they'd have to do is say, "Hey, Matt, can you teach me meditation?" And I would make it work. Whether they had the money or not, I would find a way to make it work. But they just aren't at that point yet. And why? I don't know. It's a question I don't have an answer to. I just know that every human being is like, I don't know, is on their own path, is self-sufficient. Even people who you might think, wow, like, man, that is a rough human being, like, like double-digit IQs or whatever. And I don't want to be offensive, but, even whoever they are as a human being, I personally believe that they're infinitely powerful, whether they know it or not. And they are following a path of self-development, and whether that includes learning TM or it includes some other path, they are on a path. And you kind of can't mess with somebody else's path. They sort of have to come to things on their own.
That's such great advice, because I'll always be like, our friends see how great we're doing. Why don't they want to do it? But everyone's on their own path. All right. Who's the most famous person that you have met through TM? Have you trained any professional, like, famous people?
There are some people like Bob Roth, for example. You know who Bob Roth is?
Yes.
He runs the David Lynch Foundation.
Yes. Okay.
Via the and he has a since COVID, he's had a group meditation twice a day that you can do on Zoom. And anyway, he runs David Lynch Foundation. And then my friend Penny Hintz, she's been teaching celebrities since the 70s. Bob Roth has been teaching celebrities since the 70s. And I mean, and so I always tell people, like, as a TM teacher, I've been teaching for a long time, but they kind of, those other people teach the famous and I teach the infamous.
There we go.
Here I'm in prisons
like
teaching people. But I have taught a couple famous people. I taught a professional baseball player one time, Steve Finley. I taught Steve Finley TM. People don't really know him now, but, he retired in 2007. But he was 17 years in the majors, and he learned TM with me. I taught a guy, famous director. Now it slips my mind what his name was, in Los Angeles. What did he direct? Oh God, he directed some of those Captain America movies. So I've taught a handful of celebrities. I've met a handful of them. Met David Lynch. Met Joaquin Phoenix. I was at a group meditation one time, and Joaquin Phoenix was there.
He does TM?
Just doing his TM.
I didn't know Joaquin Phoenix did it. Wow. That makes me like him more.
Yeah. He was just, and I was impressed because there was a buffet after, and I was standing next to him, and he was so much smaller than me. You see him in these movies and he looks like, this, I don't know, gladiator or something. He's all muscular swinging a sword, but yeah, he was kind of a little guy, but obviously, tremendous actor, but yeah, so a lot of famous people do TM. I think with the Beatles, it got into the entertainment industry. And once that door was opened, so many people learned, who were very famous, and now it's just kind of, it continues. So my friends who teach Transcendental Meditation in Los Angeles, they teach all kinds of celebrities all the time. I mean, I once in a while I've given some advanced techniques in Los Angeles to some famous people. There was somebody who was a porn star who came in and learned TM or learned an advanced technique from me. I know I can't remember their name.
Well, that's good. If you remembered their name,
mention that to me.
Your wife would not have been happy if you remembered that name.
Yeah. It was a guy.
Oh,
and he just happened to mention that's how he made his living. But he was really, into his TM and into his advanced technique. So yeah, everybody's got their path, right?
I hope it helped his technique in his work. I hope it made him make more money, honestly.
That's what TM does. It just makes everything better. Whatever we do, it makes it better.
Exactly. All right. I have one last question for you. Are you familiar with the Gateway program?
Maybe. What is it?
It was the CIA
paper. I'm
paper.
thinking something.
They decommissioned it in 2003, and it basically, when I read through it, as I took it, it validated everything TM has taught. Like, basically, it proved the existence of TM. It proved that there is an absolute power. Even some of the drawings you guys will have on the board were in this paper. And it really hit me because I was like, holy crap, we're right. I think that as a human, that's what we strive for, is to kind of know the path we're on and what's right. And I was like, here it is in writing. I mean, not that I trust the CIA a ton, but I mean, it was, but I was mad because they wouldn't give it to TM. They changed the name, but basically everything they described was TM. So that's kind of what made me mad. I'm like, you just gave it some other guy's name because he wanted to have it.
The CIA infiltrated the TM organization for decades, particularly in the late 70s when Jimmy Carter was president. Jimmy Carter's relative, I don't know if it was a nephew or his wife's cousin or something, somebody related to Jimmy Carter was a follower of Jim Jones and was there in Guyana when all those people drank Kool-Aid and died. And Jimmy Carter and his wife, as president and first lady, they decided they were going to crack down on cults. And so they used the CIA and the FBI to investigate, to infiltrate and investigate into what they thought were cults, and to determine if it was a cult and to determine if it was dangerous, and if it could lead to something like the Jonestown Massacre. And so TM got infiltrated. It got infiltrated by the CIA, by the FBI. And my understanding is that, and I have some pretty good sources on this, my understanding is that in the end, they decided that TM was not a cult. And there were some kind of funny reasons for that. One of the reasons they decided it wasn't a cult was that it wasn't organized well enough, which I think is hilarious.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh that hard, but it's funny.
Yeah. was that it wasn't organized well enough. And then there were other things, that the leadership had to be kind of encouraging their followers to do certain things, and that maybe there was some interest in violence or weaponry or something. And TM just had none of that. So it didn't meet the qualifications that the CIA, the FBI had for what qualified as a cult. But nevertheless, the CIA was tremendously fascinated by consciousness and mind expansion. And, you probably heard of MK Ultra, which is the program that they ran, investigating psychedelics. And they did all these experiments with people and psychedelics. And they were very interested in, esoteric powers and, telepathy and, reading other people's minds and these things. They were interested in it, and they wanted to use it for whatever reasons they wanted to use it for. And so they tried to get the knowledge of TM as well. And obviously what you said was they got a lot of it. They got the basic understanding, and I think they realized, and the KGB was doing the same thing. They were also investigating these things. And in fact, my friend sent me a video that's on YouTube. If I could think of the name, I'd tell you, but it was an ex-KGB officer, and he was talking about how he had gone to India and he had investigated, all types of consciousness development programs, and that he knew all kinds of stuff about, and he mentioned Transcendental Meditation. He knew all kinds of things about TM. And so the knowledge is there. But the interesting thing is that you can have, the knowledge, you can have some bubble diagram and explain, there's this stratification and levels in creation and, grosser levels of matter on the surface and deeper levels, everything's more unified. You can have these understandings, but until you close your eyes and you actually have that experience internally, what good does it really do you to have the understanding? Everyone's on their own path and everyone's growing, whether they believe in the concept of growth. I hate to use the word evolution. Certain people will bite your head off if you use that word, but everybody's growing, everybody's evolving, and they are, whether they know it or not. They're just growing, and that's what life is designed to teach us. And when you get to a point where you start to transcend, whether you're doing it, I know that there's no other better way to transcend on a regular basis than TM. There's no way. It's so easy. I've met people who had really great transcendental experiences, either through art or through athletics, like athletes talking about being in the zone. And yeah, you can transcend in activity if you're operating at a high level, but it can be hit and miss. And the thing about TM is that it is so reliable, and you don't have to believe it. You don't have to know anything about it. You don't have to have any intellectual understanding, nothing. It's so simple and it's so reliable. And for that reason, it can really be a tool that speeds up growth dramatically, speeds up evolution dramatically. And the more evolved we are, the happier we are. There's no doubt about that.
Thank you so much. I think that is a perfect way to end it. If anyone is interested in TM, like Matt said, you can Google it. It's never been easier to find.
TM.org. TM.org,
TM.org. There we go. Matt, thank you so much for everything you do for everyone in the community. It's invaluable. I will thank you for all of them. Thank you from me. And hopefully we see each other again. This is not the end, just the beginning.
That's right. I look forward to seeing you, Andrew, again. That'd be wonderful. Thanks for having me on your podcast, and let me know if there's anything I can do further to help you out.